What happened when an undercover CEO stepped into the world of his own luxury cruise line? Damian Wentworth, the CEO of Neptune Serenity, thought his company was running smoothly until he went undercover as a deckhand. What he uncovered shocked him. Overworked employees, toxic management, and a hard-working chef, Izzy, who was constantly overlooked because of her appearance. This undercover journey would not only open his eyes to the flaws within his company, but also lead to a complete transformation. Stay tuned as we explore the powerful story of redemption and change. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Damian Sinclair, the renowned CEO of Neptune Voyages, sat in his high-rise office overlooking the bustling city harbor. His luxury cruise empire had been his pride and joy for over a decade, known for its world-class service, fine dining, and opulent guest experiences. Yet the latest internal reports told a different story, one that threatened to sink the company's reputation. Employee turnover had skyrocketed, staff complaints had tripled, and customer satisfaction ratings had dipped for the first time in years. The once spotless image of Neptune Voyages was showing cracks, and Damian needed answers. Flipping through a stack of reports, he noticed a disturbing trend. Passengers were grumbling about slow service and unenthusiastic crew members, but what concerned him more were the anonymous complaints from employees: long working hours with little rest, aggressive supervisors, and a toxic kitchen environment on his flagship cruise liner, the Neptune Serenity, painted a grim picture. Damian had built this company on the belief that happy employees created exceptional experiences for guests, but it seemed that vision was being ignored at the operational level. Trevor Langley, the company's head of food and beverage, dismissed the concerns outright. "Overblown nonsense," he scoffed when Damian confronted him. "These workers are just soft. This is the cruise industry. Long hours come with the job." But Emily Dawson, the senior cruise director, wasn't convinced. She had been on the Neptune Serenity last season and had seen firsthand how morale had plummeted. "It's worse than you think, Damian," she said quietly. "You won't get the real story from reports. You need to see it for yourself." Her words stuck with him. If there was one thing Damian had learned in business, it was that numbers could be manipulated, but people's experiences told the real truth. He couldn't rely on filtered executive reports anymore. There was only one way to uncover what was really happening on his ship. He would go undercover as an entry-level kitchen steward aboard the Neptune Serenity, and what he would find there would change everything. Disguised as Daniel Carter, an unassuming kitchen steward, Damian Sinclair stepped onto the Neptune Serenity, the crown jewel of his luxury fleet. Gone were the tailored suits and executive privileges. Now he wore a plain white uniform, a name tag that blended into the sea of crew members, and a pair of well-worn kitchen shoes. The moment he passed through the crew entrance, the grandeur of the ship's passenger areas disappeared, replaced by a starkly different world. Below deck, the air was thick with the scent of industrial dish soap, sizzling oil, and the unmistakable exhaustion of overworked staff. A burly man with sweat-soaked sleeves barely looked up from his clipboard. "You're the new guy?" he grunted. "Dish station's that way. Keep up or get out." That was Marco, the kitchen's shift supervisor. His voice carried authority, but no warmth. Without further introductions, Damian was shoved into the heart of the operation, where he was met with the relentless clang of pans, the sharp bark of orders, and the frantic shuffle of workers moving in perfect, exhausted synchronization. It was here that he met Sienna Torres, a talented but overworked sous chef who moved with practiced precision despite the relentless demands. She barely spared him a glance as she plated an intricate seafood dish. "If you're slow, you're in the way," she muttered, tossing him a rag, "and if you're in the way, you won't last long." Damian quickly learned that the cruise kitchen was nothing like the five-star culinary experience passengers enjoyed above deck. Temperatures soared, break times were rare, and supervisors like Marco showed little patience for mistakes. The staff worked 14-hour shifts, 6 days a week, with no guarantee of a proper break. Damian noticed how the lowest-ranked workers were assigned the hardest, most thankless tasks, and those who dared complain were silenced with veiled threats about replacement. But what struck him most was the treatment of Sienna. Despite her skill and dedication, she was constantly assigned the most grueling tasks, lifting heavy boxes, scrubbing greasy surfaces, working back-to-back shifts. Other staff whispered about her, mocked her appearance, and dismissed her talent because she didn't fit the industry's image of a high-end chef. Damian clenched his jaw. If this was what his employees endured daily, then something had gone terribly wrong on his ship. And he was only just beginning to see how deep the problem ran. As the days passed, Damian Sinclair, now Daniel Carter, saw firsthand the brutal reality behind the five-star luxury his cruise line promised. The glittering chandeliers, lavish buffets, and world-class dining experiences were all sustained by an invisible workforce toiling in conditions that would make most passengers recoil. Beneath the grandeur, the lower decks told a very different story, one of exhaustion, mistreatment, and a toxic work culture that prioritized perfection over people. The kitchen was a pressure cooker in more ways than one. The shifts were grueling, stretching beyond 14 hours, with only brief, interrupted breaks to catch their breath. Supervisors barked orders like drill sergeants, and mistakes, even minor ones, were met with public humiliation. Damian watched as line cooks nearly collapsed from heat exhaustion, only to be told to toughen up and keep going. There was no room for weakness here, only results. For Sienna Torres, the only female sous chef in the kitchen, the situation was even worse. Despite being one of the most skilled cooks on the team, she was constantly relegated to the most physically demanding tasks, lifting heavy supply crates, cleaning grease-laden equipment, and handling bulk food preparation, instead of leading dishes like the others. Damian overheard cruel jokes from her male colleagues, whispered just loud enough for her to hear. Maybe if she moved faster, she wouldn't be so out of shape. No wonder we're running low on ingredients. Someone's sneaking extra portions. Should have put her in housekeeping, at least there no one has to see her. Damian watched her endure it all in silence, never once snapping back, never showing how much it stung. Instead, she pushed through, proving her worth with every perfectly seared steak and every flawless dish that left her station. Yet it was never enough. The executive chef ignored her talent, the supervisors dismissed her efforts, and the promotions always went to someone else, someone who fit the image of a luxury cruise chef. What stunned Damian the most was that this culture of mistreatment extended beyond the kitchen. Housekeeping staff were given unrealistic room quotas, deckhands worked in unsafe conditions, and servers were pressured to keep smiling through abuse from demanding passengers. The company's official policies promised fair wages, reasonable hours, and a supportive work environment, but here, below deck, reality was far different. It wasn't just an overworked crew, it was a broken system designed to squeeze every last ounce of labor from them without recognition or respect. Damian had built Aurora Cruise Lines believing it was a place where employees could thrive. But what he saw now made his stomach turn. His company wasn't just failing its employees, it was exploiting them. And it was time for him to find out just how deep this problem ran. The turning point came on the third night of the cruise, when the Aurora Majesty hosted a high-profile VIP dinner for elite guests, influential investors, celebrity clients, and media personalities who expected nothing short of perfection. The event was a public relations spectacle, a chance to showcase the cruise line's luxury experience. But for the kitchen staff, it was a nightmare waiting to unfold. Preparations began at 5 a.m., with the kitchen running at full capacity, every station under immense pressure to deliver a flawless multi-course meal. The air was thick with stress, the clatter of pots and pans drowned out by shouted orders and sharp reprimands. Damian, still disguised as Daniel, had been assigned to prep work, dicing vegetables, stirring sauces, and plating entrees as the tension escalated. At the heart of it all was Sienna Torres, managing the meat station, a task normally handled by the head sous chef, who had conveniently disappeared to supervise from a distance. She worked tirelessly, grilling premium cuts to perfection, monitoring temperatures, and ensuring dishes went out exactly as requested. But with staff shortages and last-minute menu changes, things quickly spiraled out of control. Then, the inevitable disaster struck. A mix-up in the orders sent the wrong entree to the VIP table, a group of influential food critics and investors. The mistake sent executive chef Marco Leclerc into a rage. Instead of taking responsibility, he publicly humiliated Sienna, yelling at her in front of the entire kitchen. "This is your fault. Can't you follow simple instructions?" he bellowed. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Sienna, her face burning red from embarrassment. She tried to explain the mix-up had been caused by a last-minute menu revision, something completely out of her control, but Marco wasn't listening. He needed a scapegoat. "Maybe if you didn't take up so much space back here, you wouldn't be so slow," he sneered, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. Several of the male cooks chuckled under their breath. Sienna stood frozen, her hands clenched into fists. Damian could see the flicker of anger, humiliation, and exhaustion warring in her eyes. She had endured years of mistreatment, but this moment, being belittled and blamed for someone else's mistake in front of the entire staff, was the final straw. Without a word, she pulled off her apron, slammed it onto the counter, and walked out. The kitchen was left paralyzed, overwhelmed by the fallout of losing their most competent chef in the middle of a high-stakes event. Damian looked around, heart pounding. Someone needed to step up. And if no one else would, he would. The kitchen was in absolute chaos. With Sienna gone, orders were backing up, dishes were being sent out late, and the executive chef, Marco Leclerc, was barking frantic orders at an already overwhelmed staff. The once efficient machine had completely unraveled, and guests were beginning to notice. Damian had seen enough. The mistreatment, the exploitation, the blatant disrespect, it all ended now. He stepped forward, his jaw tight, and addressed the kitchen in a commanding voice that cut through the tension. "Enough!" His voice echoed through the room, and for the first time, Marco looked at him, really looked at him. "You think this is Sienna's fault? You're the one who failed your team." Marco's face twisted in confusion. "Who do you think you are, telling me how to run my kitchen?" Damian exhaled sharply, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek, gold-embossed ID badge, one that bore the name Damian Sinclair, CEO of Aurora Cruise Lines. The silence was deafening. Cooks, servers, dishwashers, all of them froze in place as realization dawned. Marco's face paled. "I've been here for days, working the same shifts, watching everything," Damian continued, his voice measured but firm. "I've seen how you treat your staff, how you ignore talent, how you abuse your authority. I built this company to be a world-class cruise line, not a dictatorship where the people who hold it together are treated like garbage." Murmurs spread through the kitchen as the staff processed the shocking revelation. Some looked guilty, others relieved. A few even glanced at Marco with thinly veiled satisfaction. The tyrant was finally being called out. Marco forced a chuckle, straightening his jacket as if to recover some sense of authority. "You don't understand how this business works, Mr. Sinclair. Running a kitchen isn't about making everyone feel good. It's about results." Damian's eyes narrowed. "And what results are those, exactly? Burned-out staff, high turnover, a sinking reputation? Because I've also seen the reviews, Marco. Guests are starting to see through the cracks, and it's because of people like you that we're losing the trust of both our employees and customers." He turned to the staff, his voice carrying the weight of a promise. "This ends today. No more abuse, no more toxic leadership, no more rewarding arrogance over competence." Then he looked Marco dead in the eye. "Pack your bags. You're fired." A stunned hush fell over the room, and then, slowly, a few employees began to smile. For the first time in years, change had come to the Aurora Majesty. The moment Marco stormed out of the kitchen, the entire staff seemed to collectively exhale, as if a years-long weight had finally been lifted from their shoulders. But for Damian, this was only the beginning. Exposing the problem was one thing, fixing it was another. He had seen firsthand how the toxic environment had broken morale, crushed ambition, and driven away the very people who kept the luxury cruise line running. If he truly wanted to rebuild Neptune Serenity, he had to start from the ground up. The first order of business was reinstating Sienna. Damian found her on the lower deck, packing her bags, resignation letter in hand. "I'm not going back to that kitchen," she said bitterly, avoiding his gaze. But Damian wasn't there to beg. He was there to make things right. "You don't have to go back under, Marco," he assured her, "because he's gone, and I want you to take his place." Sienna froze. "What?" "You've been running that kitchen for months, Sienna," Damian said. "You've been the one keeping everything together. I need a head chef who cares about the food and the people who make it." For the first time, Sienna looked at him with something other than skepticism, a glimmer of hope. "You really mean that?" Damian nodded. "More than anything." With Sienna promoted and new, fair labor policies put in place, change came swiftly. Damian personally restructured the management system, ensuring that promotions were based on talent and dedication, not favoritism. Pay was increased, shifts were reorganized to prevent burnout, and an anonymous reporting system was introduced to protect employees from future mistreatment. When Damian walked through the kitchen a week later, it was almost unrecognizable. The tense, fearful silence had been replaced with laughter and teamwork. Employees greeted him not with suspicion, but with relief. And Sienna? She was thriving, leading the kitchen with the confidence of someone who finally knew her worth. The next time Damian dined in the grand ballroom, the dishes were nothing short of spectacular. Not just because of the flavors, but because of the spirit behind them. Neptune's serenity had found its heart again, and this time, it would never be lost. The transformation of Neptune's serenity was well underway, but Damian knew there was one last crucial piece to making things right. Izzy. He found her exactly where he expected, quietly scrubbing down the prep station, her eyes downcast as if she still expected another cruel remark to come her way. The kitchen had changed, but Izzy had spent too many years being overlooked, treated as disposable despite her skill, and she wasn't ready to believe that things were truly different. "You don't have to do that anymore," Damian said, stepping beside her. Izzy looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" And Damian exhaled, pulling out a neatly folded piece of paper from his pocket. "I mean, you're not just a kitchen assistant anymore. You're the new executive sous chef." For a long moment, Izzy didn't move. She stared at the paper in his hand, as if it might vanish if she blinked too fast. Then she let out a disbelieving laugh, shaking her head. "That's not funny, Damian." "I'm not joking," he said gently. "You've earned this. You've been running this kitchen in the background for years, making sure service never falls apart, even when no one gave you credit. You saved the dinner service last week. You've kept this place together, and it's time the world saw that." Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away with the sleeve of her apron. "No one's ever believed in me like this before." "Z, you were never the problem," Damian assured her. "The people in charge were. But that's over now." That night, during the staff recognition ceremony, Damian took the stage in the ship's grand ballroom. The once disconnected employees of Neptune's Serenity now stood together, a team finally seen and valued. "We're here tonight to celebrate the people who truly make this cruise line exceptional," he began. "And no one deserves recognition more than Izzy Reynolds." As applause erupted around her, Izzy walked onto the stage, still in disbelief. Damian handed her a crisp white chef's coat embroidered with her new title. The moment she slipped it on, the past years of humiliation fell away. Izzy had spent her entire career being invisible, but now she stood center stage, applauded, respected, and finally seen. As Neptune's Serenity sailed toward its next destination, the ship was no longer just a floating palace for the wealthy. It had become a place of opportunity, fairness, and respect. Under Damian's leadership, the toxic culture that once thrived below deck had been dismantled, replaced by policies that ensured fair wages, reasonable working hours, and a strict zero-tolerance stance on workplace harassment. Employees, once exhausted and fearful, now walked the ship's halls with a renewed sense of pride. Izzy's promotion to executive sous chef symbolized more than just a career milestone. It was proof that true talent and dedication would no longer go unnoticed. Her confidence had grown, and her presence in the kitchen demanded respect. Other overlooked staff members saw her success as a sign that they too had a future beyond just surviving the grind. Passengers also began to notice the shift. Service improved, and with it, the reputation of Neptune's Serenity began to heal. No longer just a luxury brand masking dysfunction beneath the surface, Aurora Cruise Lines became a gold standard in the industry, not just for its opulence, but for the way it treated its people. Standing on the ship's deck, Damian took a deep breath of the salty ocean air. He had come undercover to uncover a problem, but he was leaving having rebuilt an empire. One where every crew member, from the lowest-ranked deckhand to the executive team, was valued. As the ship sailed into the sunset, Damian knew one thing for certain. Neptune Serenity was no longer just a luxury cruise, it was a company reborn. The story of Neptune Serenity highlights a powerful lesson about leadership, integrity, and the importance of valuing employees. Damian Wentworth started his journey as a CEO focused on financial reports and corporate reputation, but by going undercover he discovered the true cost of neglecting the workforce. What looked like a thriving luxury cruise on the surface was, in reality, a workplace riddled with exhaustion, unfair treatment, and toxic management. Through this experience, Damian learned that a company's success is not just about profits and prestige, it's about the people who keep it running. When employees are overworked, underpaid, and disrespected, service quality suffers, and the company's reputation begins to crumble. However, when employees feel heard, respected, and fairly treated, they perform at their best, and the entire organization thrives. Izzy's story also teaches us an important lesson. Talent and hard work should never be overshadowed by bias. Her promotion was not just a reward for her perseverance, but a statement that merit should always outweigh appearances or favoritism. At its core, this story is a reminder that real leadership isn't about power, it's about responsibility. A great leader lifts others up, ensuring that success is built on fairness, not exploitation.